Reborn in 1977, I deliberately tore up my college acceptance letter, stayed in the village to feed pigs and raise cattle, willingly becoming a simple country girl. All because, in my past life, just as I received my first college acceptance letter, my fiancé, Ethan Carter, the regiment commander, was suddenly diagnosed with a terminal illness. He cried and begged me to sell my acceptance letter to Lily White in exchange for financial support. "Emma, you have so many chances to take the exam again, but my mother is still at home, and I still want to marry you. Just this once, please?" Remembering our years of love, I had no choice but to agree. On our wedding day, he gazed at me with deep affection, promising to love me for a lifetime. But soon after, he dedicated himself to serving the country, honoring duty above all else, leaving me behind to care for our children, slowly extinguishing my desire for education. My entire life passed in hardship and sacrifice. Until the moment before I died, I begged him and our children to stay with me one last time. But Ethan shook off my hand, insisting on taking our children to Lily White's research conference instead. "Emma, if it weren't for Lily wanting to go to college back then, I wouldn't have faked an illness just to marry you for that acceptance letter. For over 60 years, I've suffered endlessly. Now just let me go." Through the cold telephone line, my children blamed me as well. "Mom, you should have let Dad and Aunt Lily be together back then. If not for you, they would have been together long ago. You've shamed us. You ruined the love of a great scientist. We're taking you to beg Aunt Lily for forgiveness." At that moment, my heart completely died. So my entire life had been nothing more than a joke. All of this just because of my acceptance letter. Then I was reborn. I returned to the day I received my acceptance letter, the day Ethan cried and begged me to save his life. "Emma, I don't want to die yet. Please, give me your acceptance letter and save me." He bent down close to my ear, pleading, his strong hands gripping my arm, shaking me relentlessly. The pain made me gasp softly, and when I looked at the young Ethan Carter, I finally realized I had been reborn. "Emma, I know this is hard for you, but you can take the college entrance exam as many times as you want. I can't bear to die. If I die, who will protect you? I haven't even fulfilled my promise to marry you yet. I still want to raise our children with you. If I die just like this, I won't accept it." He sighed in frustration. "If you insist on going to college, then I'll just let fate take its course. But Emma, we've known each other for 18 years. Can you really bear to let me go?" Before I could even answer, his eyes reddened with tears, pretending to look devastated, as if he was about to leave, rejected. In my past life, on the very day I received my acceptance letter, Ethan had said these exact same words. Back then, out of love and nostalgia, I painfully gave up my future and agreed to his request. And the first thing Ethan did after recovering was marry me. At our wedding, he knelt before me and made a solemn vow. "Emma, you saved my life. I will spend the rest of my days repaying you. I will fully support your dreams. I will make you the happiest woman." For the first year of our marriage, I remained focused on my studies. But just as I was preparing to retake the college entrance exam, Ethan begged me to have a child. He said his mother was gravely ill, and her only wish was to see her grandchild. He knelt before me, pleading humbly. In the end, I softened and gave in. But after giving birth, our baby cried endlessly. His mother's illness worsened, and I had no choice but to keep postponing my education. Again and again, until I completely abandoned my dream of studying. And when I saw Lily holding my college acceptance letter, living the life that should have been mine, I pinned all my hopes on my children instead. I worked tirelessly, sacrificing myself to raise 2 outstanding children for Ethan. But years later, as I lay dying in a hospital bed, my children didn't hesitate to pull out my life support tube. "Mom, you're just a dying person. Stop holding us back. Aunt Lily has an excellent degree and credentials. She can take us to even greater heights. You're just an old, washed-up woman, bringing nothing but shame to us. If it weren't for you, Dad and Aunt Lily would have been together long ago. You ruined such a legendary love story. Don't you feel guilty? You should use your death to atone for Aunt Lily." My hands trembled as I reached out, grabbing Ethan's arm, desperately hoping he would save me. But without hesitation, he coldly pushed me away. "I've already spent 60 years repaying you. That's more than enough to make up for that college acceptance letter. I never loved you. Please, let me go. A lifetime of struggle, only to end up abandoned by everyone I once held dear. My entire existence had been a joke, all because I foolishly believed in the lies of the man standing before me. But now I had been given another chance. I would never make the same mistake again. I lifted my gaze and stared at Ethan, my voice calm and detached. So, the only way to save your life is with my acceptance letter? I let out a small sigh and shook my head. Too bad, I already tore it up. His expression shifted instantly. Tore it up? No way, you're joking, right? Ethan was so shocked that he forgot to cry. He lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. Pain shot up my arm, but this time I didn't hesitate. I wrenched myself free from his grasp without mercy. He froze, staring at me in disbelief. In the past, I had always clung to him, eager for his affection. But now that I had been reborn, the only thing I wanted was to stay as far away from him as possible. I don't want to go to college anymore, I said flatly. So I just tore it up. I've decided to stay in the village and raise pigs instead. Sorry, I can't save your life. I had no interest in explaining further, so I threw out the excuse carelessly and hurried away. Since it was getting late, Ethan hesitated, likely afraid of attracting gossip from the neighbors. He didn't dare chase after me. The moment I returned home, I carefully tucked the acceptance letter beneath my bed, ensuring no one would ever find it. This time, I wouldn't let anyone take away the life that rightfully belonged to me. I knew Ethan wouldn't give up so easily. He was bound to make another move soon. Sure enough, the next morning, as soon as I stepped out of the house, I saw him waving at me from afar, looking eager. Emma, are you heading out to gather pig feed? You're really not going to school? Can you at least take out the acceptance letter and let me see if it's still usable? You must have gotten into a really good college. Isn't it a shame to waste it? He spoke so naturally, as if it were perfectly reasonable to ask me to give up my future for him. He even set his hoe down and started weeding the grass in front of my house, as if trying to impress me with his hard work. I felt uneasy at his sudden enthusiasm and turned to leave, but before I could, my father caught me. You ungrateful girl. Can't you see Ethan is talking to you? My father valued Ethan greatly. He was an uneducated man who believed that only those in power were truly capable. Ethan had become a regiment commander at such a young age, while I was nothing more than a bookworm. To my father, marrying Ethan meant securing a good life. In my past life, I had followed his wishes and married Ethan, only to realize too late how wrong I had been. After our wedding, Ethan began looking down on my father, treating him with nothing but disdain. Whenever my father traveled all the way from the village to bring us fresh pork, duck, or geese, Ethan would accept everything with a smile, then immediately send my father away under the excuse that our children were too timid to meet strangers. Even on the day my father died, when I wanted to return home to attend his funeral, Ethan refused. Your children's education is more important, he had told me. He forcibly kept me at home, and by the time I finally managed to return, I had missed my father's final moments. But when it came to Lily's father, Dr. White, Ethan treated him with nothing but the highest respect. He would personally bring the finest tea and wine to visit, always making sure our children called him Grandpa White, treating him like royalty. In my past life, I had endured it all, forcing my father to suffer humiliation after humiliation. This time, at the very least, I had the power to choose not to marry Ethan. Ethan only cleared a small patch of weeds before coming back over, attempting to strike up another conversation. But I was focused on feeding the pigs, refusing to spare him even a glance. Undeterred, he reached out and grabbed my hand, playing the part of a devoted lover. Are you still mad at me over what happened a few days ago? His voice was low and coaxing. I only did that because I love you too much. I was desperate to marry you. Either way, you're going to be my wife sooner or later. Even if someone caught us sneaking around, it wouldn't be a big deal. But Lily, she's still an innocent young woman. She couldn't handle people talking about her. The moment he mentioned her name, my mind was flooded with memories of that night, the night I accidentally stumbled upon their disgusting little secret. That night, I had been out searching for a lost duck when I unexpectedly walked in on Ethan and Lily, tangled up together in the woods. The moment Lily saw me, she let out a sharp scream, and bolted. The commotion drew the attention of the neighbors, who rushed out to investigate. But by the time they arrived, the only people left standing there were me and Ethan, alone in the dark. The rumors began the very next day. Whispers about how I was a shameless girl, incapable of behaving properly, spread through the village like wildfire. Every morning on my way to school, children would throw rocks at me, shouting insults. Even the front of my house wasn't spared. Someone had left an old, tattered shoe outside my door, a cruel symbol implying I was no better than a discarded woman. And now, Ethan had the audacity to bring it up so casually, as if I had been the one in the wrong. I clenched my fists, staring at him with cold, unwavering eyes. This time, I would not let history repeat itself. Every time I had tried to explain myself, Ethan would coax me with gentle words, convincing me otherwise. "This is for the best," he would say. "Now we can be together openly, without hiding anymore. There's nothing you can't endure for me, right? If you expose Lily, she won't be able to handle it. Be good, Emma. Just endure it a little longer, for my sake." Even now, just thinking about it made my heart ache. He had protected Lily at my expense, throwing me into the fire of public shame without a second thought. He had never cared about the humiliation and suffering I endured. I took a deep breath, my voice hoarse as I finally spoke. "You look perfectly healthy to me. You don't seem like someone on the verge of death. Shouldn't you stay far away from me now?" Ethan had never been rejected by me before. The moment he heard my words, his face darkened. "Emma, are you actually giving me attitude right now? All I want is your acceptance letter. If you don't want to break up with me, then hand it over, fast, or don't come crying to me later." His mood turned foul, and he threw his hoe onto the ground, standing with his arms crossed under the shade of a tree. Threatening me with a breakup was his favorite tactic. He had done it countless times before. If I didn't help Lily with her assignments, he'd threaten to break up. If I didn't bring Lily food, he'd throw a tantrum, even if she didn't like the meals I made. Now, all it took was me speaking to him with a slightly colder tone, and he was already using the same old threat. Yet, when Lily tugged his ear and scolded him, he would grin and apologize like a fool. In my past life, his threats had always worked. I had done everything he wanted, exhausting myself to please him. But now, I was simply tired. With an indifferent expression, I replied, "I told you, I tore it up. I don't have it anymore, and I never will." Without another word, I turned and ran back into the house. Ethan shouted after me, but I didn't look back. Instead, I quickened my pace, instinctively wiping my nose when no one was looking. The moment I shut the door behind me, I let out a quiet sigh of relief, thinking this ridiculous situation had finally ended. But as soon as I lifted my head, I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Lily was sitting on my bed, holding the acceptance letter I had hidden just last night. She smiled at me and waved the paper in her hand. "Since you insist that your acceptance letter is torn, then I suppose this one belongs to me now." My eyes widened in disbelief. "How did you find it?" "No one knew where I hid it." I stared at the paper in her hands, checking again and again. It was undeniably my acceptance letter. Lily smirked and raised an eyebrow toward Ethan, who was standing behind me, looking guilty. "Of course," Ethan told me. "He said you always like to hide important things under your bed." I turned stiffly, staring at Ethan. His lips were pressed together, as if he felt ashamed. So that was his true reason for showing up at my house so early in the morning. He wasn't here to win me over. He had only come to distract me, giving Lily enough time to steal my acceptance letter. A bitter taste filled my throat. I wanted to cry, but knew it was pointless. "You really think stealing my acceptance letter means you can take my place at school?" I asked, my voice steady despite my anger. "Aren't you afraid I'll report you?" Lily didn't even flinch. She carefully folded my acceptance letter and slipped it into her pocket before looking up at me lazily. "Have you forgotten who my mother is?" she sneered. "If you dare report me, you can say goodbye to your family's ration and postage stamps." My heart clenched. The fiery rage inside me was instantly smothered. Lily's mother was the leader of the production brigade, responsible for distributing ration stamps. In this era, money wasn't enough to buy food. Ration stamps were more valuable than cash. No wonder she was bold enough to steal from me. She knew she had leverage. I let out a bitter chuckle, feeling an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Even in this life, despite all my efforts, my acceptance letter had still ended up in Lily's hands. Behind me, Ethan hesitated for a long time before finally reaching out to pat my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Emma," he muttered. "I did lie to you. I was never actually sick. But if you give your acceptance letter to Lily, I promise I'll marry you right away. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." He spoke as if someone was holding a knife to his throat, forcing him to agree. As if marrying me was nothing but an obligation. I stared at his conflicted expression, feeling no joy, no relief, only disgust. "Ethan, I don't want to marry you anymore," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I just want my acceptance letter back." The moment the words left my lips, Ethan's face twisted. Ethan furrowed his brows and let out a long sigh before speaking in a resigned tone. "Emma, stop being difficult. Going to college is really important for Lily. If it makes you feel better, I promise I won't contact her anymore in the future." Lily wiped at her tear-streaked face, looking delicate and pitiful. "Emma, I'm doing this for your own good. I know you like Ethan, and I thought that if I left, the two of you could finally be together." I had no patience for their lies. Without hesitation, I lunged forward, snatching the acceptance letter from Lily's hands. Just as I was about to hide it again, a sharp voice rang out from a distance. "What are you two making a scene about?" The moment I saw my father, I clung to him like a lifeline, tears welling in my eyes. "Dad, Ethan said he'd only marry me if I gave my acceptance letter to Lily. But I don't want to get married. I want to go to school." No matter how arrogant Ethan and Lily were, they were still just kids. The presence of an elder made them instinctively fearful. Ethan stumbled over his words as he tried to explain. "Uncle, I really want to marry Emma. If she goes to college, she'll be too far away. I won't be able to take care of her." My father took my hand, giving me a reassuring grip. I thought he was about to scold Ethan and Lily. Instead, he took my acceptance letter and placed it in Ethan's hands. "You're a good kid. I trust you with my daughter." I stared in shock as my father turned to me with a stern expression. "Emma, stop making a fuss. What's the point of a woman studying? It's just to find a good husband in the end. Listen to your father and don't embarrass your man." Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement as he clutched the letter, while I stood frozen as if struck by lightning. It wasn't until Ethan left that my father patted my shoulder, snapping me out of my daze. "Silly girl, you must be so happy right now. Just stay home and prepare for your wedding. Your father will give you the best dowry, even if it costs me my life. You've had a hard life, losing your mother at a young age. But now, you're finally going to have a good life," he said, voice cracking as he wiped at his eyes. I knew that, in my father's eyes, this was the best future he could arrange for me. But how could he understand? The Carter family was nothing but a den of wolves. I ran after Ethan, and even from a distance, I heard him speaking to Lily in a gentle, affectionate tone I had never heard before. "Lily, now you can pursue your dreams and go to college. Don't worry, I won't let Emma leave. No one can stop you, and I'll come find you once this is over. We'll talk things through then. Emma will understand and support us, won't she?" They had stolen my acceptance letter, sentenced me to a lifetime of servitude to the Carter family, and now they acted as if I was the one in the wrong. There was no time for sorrow. I rushed forward and grabbed Lily's arm, my grip tight with desperation. "Give me back my acceptance letter." Ethan was startled by my sudden appearance, his expression darkened with annoyance. "Emma, that's enough. I already agreed to marry you and give you the rest of my life as compensation. What more do you want? How long are you going to keep making a scene?" I took a deep breath, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. My focus remained on the acceptance letter in Lily's hand. She twisted and turned, trying to dodge me. Just as I was about to snatch it back, she raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. A sharp sting spread through my cheek, and my ears buzzed from the impact. Lily's expression twisted with malice as she gritted her teeth. "If I can't have it, neither can you." With a vicious tug, she ripped the acceptance letter in half. I stood there in shock, watching the pieces flutter to the ground, scattered by the wind. My mind went blank. "If I can't go to college, then neither can you," Lily sneered. "Try again next year if you want, but if you do, I'll just take it from you again. If you have the guts, go ahead and fight me for the rest of your life." I reached out, my fingers grasping helplessly at the fragments of my future as they disappeared into the wind. Ethan's voice was filled with reproach. "Emma, this is all your fault. If you hadn't tried to snatch the letter back, Lily wouldn't have torn it in a panic. How are you going to make it up to her? Now she can't go to college because of you. You have to take the exam again next year and give her your acceptance letter. Otherwise, don't expect me to marry you this year." No matter what Lily did, Ethan would always take her side. Before I could even open my mouth, he had already placed the blame on me. Lily pouted, playing the victim, even though she was the one who had just destroyed my future. "And now, because of Emma, everything is ruined," Lily sobbed. "I'd rather be dead than suffer this humiliation. There's no one in this entire town with better grades than her. If I want to go to college, my mother will have to find someone from another town and try to buy their acceptance letter. Or maybe, Emma, you could promise to take the exam again next year and give me your letter as soon as you receive it. Otherwise, no matter how much you regret this, I will never forgive you." Seeing her furious expression, I almost wished I really had been the one to tear up the acceptance letter. The way she scolded me, as if I had committed the worst crime imaginable, was laughable. I wiped my tears and stood up, completely unfazed. "Regret? I have nothing to regret. You two, on the other hand, are completely finished." Lily let out a mocking snort, her face full of disdain. "You're insane. That was your acceptance letter. What does this have to do with Ethan or me?" I bent down and picked up the largest fragment of the shredded letter. It just so happened to be the part with the name on it. Smirking, I turned to face them. "Did I ever say this was my acceptance letter?" I said slowly. "Hate to break it to you, but this actually belongs to someone else, specifically to the mayor's daughter, Sophia Shen." Lily's face immediately paled. I continued, my tone casual. "Sophia and I are close friends. It just so happened that she was accepted into the same university as me, but for a major she didn't like. I, on the other hand, got accepted for her favorite major. So we decided to swap acceptance letters before officially enrolling. I only received hers yesterday, and I hadn't even sent out mine yet before you two tore it to pieces." I tilted my head slightly, watching the fear creep onto Lily's face. "Tell me, do you think the mayor will let you off for this?" Ethan swallowed nervously, snatching the fragment from my hand and scanning the name on it. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He was completely speechless. Lily clutched Ethan's arm, her lips trembling. "What do we do now?" she whimpered, her eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to offend Sophia. This could ruin my entire future." Then, as if something clicked in her mind, her panic turned to rage. She whipped her head toward me, voice shrill. "Emma, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You planned this all along." I shrugged nonchalantly. "I didn't tell you to steal from me. That was all Ethan's idea. If you want to blame someone, blame him." I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving behind the sound of Lily's sobbing and Ethan's furious shouting. It didn't take long for the mayor to hear about what had happened. He arrived at my house in a hurry, his face filled with barely contained fury. His daughter had worked hard for 18 years to earn her place in college, only to have her acceptance letter destroyed because of Lily's recklessness. I calmly recounted the entire incident to him, from Ethan pressuring me to give up my acceptance letter, to them outright stealing it from my home. As I spoke, the mayor's expression darkened, his frustration growing with every word. He let out a long, heavy sigh, his hands tightening into fists. "It's all because my daughter was greedy," he muttered. "She insisted on switching majors with you. And now, thanks to this disaster, she has to retake the college entrance exam next year." His voice turned sharp. "As for Lily, I will not let this slide. A girl her age, daring to do something so bold, she needs to be taught a lesson." The mayor was just about to leave when, from a distance, Lily's voice rang out in a high-pitched wail. I didn't do it on purpose. It's all Emma's fault. She set me up." The mayor froze mid-step, turning to glare at her. But Lily wasn't done. "You know Emma's family is poor," she cried, voice trembling. "She's always been jealous of people like us. That's why she purposely tore up the letter and blamed it on me. Everyone in the village knows how she treats me. She's always bullied me. Then she pointed at Ethan. And why would Ethan help me steal her acceptance letter? He's my fiancé. Why would he help me do something like that? It doesn't make any sense. Lily's lies flowed smoothly, and what shocked me most wasn't her ability to twist the truth. It was how quickly the entire village backed her up. One by one, the villagers stepped forward, nodding in agreement. That's right. Lily is a good girl. She would never steal someone's acceptance letter. Her mother is the village leader. She raised her well. A girl like that wouldn't do such a thing. Bookmark. Go back. Emma, on the other hand. Someone let out a knowing chuckle. She's always sneaking around with men in the woods. Who knows what kind of dirty things she's done? I clenched my fists, feeling the rage and helplessness build inside me. Even in this life, no matter how hard I tried to change my fate, they still found a way to twist everything against me. People like her must have a filthy mind, a villager scoffed. If that wasn't her own acceptance letter, then whose could it be? I stood there in stunned silence, watching as the mayor slowly approached me. His eyes were dark with anger. I never expected you to be bold enough to lie to me, he said coldly. Are you ready to face the consequences of your actions? I shook my head helplessly, finally realizing that tears were streaming down my face uncontrollably. I swear, I didn't do it. You can ask my father. He was there the whole time. He saw Ethan and Lily take my things with his own eyes. But the mayor's expression only grew darker, his gaze filled with contempt. Of course, your father would defend you. Do you take me for a fool? You're just a young girl, and instead of focusing on your studies, you're already learning how to manipulate people. Do you really think having an education will make you untouchable? Your hardships are only just beginning. You should be grateful for the life you have now. These are the best days you'll ever get. With a dismissive glance, he turned away and climbed into his car. The villagers cheered as they sent him off, their faces filled with joy. But only I knew that my future had just been sealed. Even if the mayor's daughter never went to college, she would still live a comfortable life. Meanwhile, even if I did get an education, it would all be for nothing. I had offended the one person I should never have crossed. In a time like this, when someone in power wanted to ruin you, there was nothing you could do to fight back. Knowledge was valuable, but power was far greater. It was the same reason Lily's mother, despite only being the village committee leader, could control the distribution of ration and postage stamps. She had the power to manipulate the villagers, and they were more than willing to stand up for her daughter. Even though they knew Lily was lying, they repeated her version of the story so many times that they convinced themselves it was the truth. I lifted my head and looked at Ethan and Lily. There was not a trace of guilt on their faces, only smug satisfaction. Ethan walked over to me, his expression deliberately gentle as he ruffled my hair. I gave you a chance last night, Emma. You were the one who didn't take it. I stiffened. Last night, he had climbed over my window, knocking softly against the glass. He had pleaded with me, begging me not to tell the mayor the truth. He wanted me to take the blame for everything. In return, he promised to marry me properly, to make me his wife with dignity and honor. I had grabbed a broom and swung it straight at his face, telling him to get as far away from me as possible. I would never marry him. I would never listen to him. Before leaving, he had gritted his teeth and said, "You'll regret this, Emma." And now, here I was, regretting nothing but my own past foolishness. After the villagers dispersed, Ethan lingered behind. His voice was low and coaxing. "There's no point in you going to college now. Why not just give the acceptance letter to Lily? Think of it as doing a good deed. Do it for me, okay?" He paused, then added, "Even if you do graduate, what will it change? Right now, I'm already a regiment commander. Soon, I'll become the mayor. After that, I'll be promoted to a general. No matter how hard you study, you'll never catch up to me." His voice turned softer, smoother, the same tone he always used when speaking to Lily. "Emma, this is your last chance. Give up your meaningless future, and in exchange, you'll marry into a life of prestige. Isn't that a good deal?" I wiped my tears and stood up. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my acceptance letter, holding it tightly against my chest. "Never," I said firmly. "Even if I don't go to college, I will never marry you. No matter what happens, I will never, ever marry you." I shoved him aside with all my strength and ran back into my house. Covering my face with my hands, I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Outside, Ethan stood frozen for a long time before he finally sneered, his voice filled with menace. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when you change your mind." I lay in bed, curled up in misery, not moving for an entire day. It wasn't until my father came in and coaxed me gently that I finally ate my first bite of food. But when I looked up at his meal, I realized he had only taken a few sips of thin porridge. "Why aren't you eating?" I asked, my voice hoarse. My father hesitated, but under my insistence, he finally admitted the truth. Lily's mother had cut off our ration stamps. They were going to starve us into submission. A surge of fury burned through me, driving away the despair that had weighed me down all day. Even in my past life, my father had been treated unfairly and humiliated time and time again. But this time, I wouldn't let them win. I realized I couldn't keep going on like this. I poured the rest of my rice into my father's bowl, swallowed 2 gulps of cold water, and ran out the door. If no one in this village would speak up for me, then I would fight for my own justice. There was no time to waste. I carefully sealed the torn pieces of my acceptance letter in an envelope and took them to the military base. Fortunately, I had walked this path to Ethan's unit countless times before. Even with my eyes closed, I could find my way there. At the entrance, I claimed to be Ethan's fiancé visiting him. As the saying goes, good news never spreads, but gossip travels fast. All sorts of rumors about me and Ethan had already spread within the unit, so the guard didn't hesitate to let me in. I had barely stepped inside the base when I ran straight into Ethan, his face dark with displeasure. "What are you doing here? Did you really chase me all the way here?" He smirked, crossing his arms. "Are you regretting rejecting me? Have you finally decided to hand over the acceptance letter to Lily?" His tone turned condescending. "Too bad, Emma. I already gave you a chance. Even if you hand it over now, I won't marry you immediately. I'll think about when to propose later." He extended his hands toward me expectantly. "Now, give me the letter. You can leave afterward. If people see you here, they'll start talking. I don't want to be the laughingstock of the base." He went on and on, listing his demands as if I had no choice but to obey. I let out a bitter chuckle, my mind flashing back to my past life. Back then, after marrying Ethan, I was never allowed to visit him at the base. Every time the unit held a family event, he refused to take me along, claiming that real men didn't need their wives hovering around them. Later, I learned the truth. Every officer brought their wife, even the highest-ranking leaders. The real reason Ethan never took me was because he was afraid of upsetting Lily. To him, I was an embarrassment. I wasn't as beautiful as Lily, and bringing me along wouldn't boost his image. Now, as I looked at him again, I no longer cared what he thought of me. I only wanted to end this as quickly as possible and put as much distance between us as I could. I forced a smile. "An acceptance letter is far too important. Do you think I'd dare bring it out with me?" I lowered my voice to sound accommodating. "I'll give it to you when you return. But for now, can I stay here with you for a while?" "Don't worry, I won't interfere with your training. I just want to walk around the base. I won't mention your name, and I won't embarrass you. Is that okay?" Ethan frowned, but didn't refuse. He made me promise again to hand over the letter when he came back, and I obediently nodded. Once he was gone and out of sight, I immediately got to work. I moved quietly, carefully navigating the base until I found Ethan's commanding officer. Without hesitation, I knocked on his office door. After introducing myself, I explained everything. Ethan's coercion, the stolen acceptance letter, and how his fiancée and her mother had cut off my family's ration stamps to force me into submission. The officer, a kind old man, listened intently. As I spoke, his expression darkened, and by the time I finished, his eyes were red with restrained anger. "I never imagined Ethan would be this kind of person," he muttered. "This is a serious breach of conduct. How can someone like him be trusted to lead men?" He slammed his fist on the desk. "I will deal with this personally." Then he turned his attention to Lily's mother. A village committee leader using her power to starve someone's family? Outrageous. This won't be overlooked. I handed over the pieces of the torn acceptance letter. "Can you check for fingerprints?" The results came back quickly, and they were exactly what I expected. To avoid alerting Ethan and Lily, I had the officer send the evidence directly to the mayor's home. At the same time, I called Sophia to warn her to expect the delivery and make sure her father saw it. By the time I stepped out of the office, night had fallen. Carefully avoiding Ethan, I made my way back home and slept soundly for the first time in a long while. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of a woman sobbing outside my house. When I opened the door, I found Lily standing there, her hair a mess, wailing as if her world had ended. "It was you, wasn't it, Emma?" she cried. "You did this. My mother was dismissed as village leader first thing this morning. You ruined everything." Her voice cracked as she screamed. "Why couldn't we talk about this? Why did you have to push us into a corner?" Behind her, Ethan stood with a stormy expression, his fists clenched at his sides. His usual smug arrogance had vanished, replaced by unfiltered rage. "You went to my superior, didn't you?" he growled. "I was questioned by my officer all night. I've been demoted 3 ranks. I'm no better than a common soldier now." He glared at me, his teeth grinding together. "I really underestimated you." "And what exactly do you gain from all this?" Ethan growled. "If you don't want me to break off the engagement, then you'd better come with me and explain everything to my superiors. Otherwise, I will never marry you." He grabbed my wrist forcefully, but I immediately slapped his hand away. Tilting my head up, I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice unwavering. "I've told you countless times I don't want to marry you." "I never did," I sneered. "I've known about you and Lily for a long time. Everything you've done for me was only ever to use me. Did you really think I was stupid?" I crossed my arms. "Your superior wouldn't have punished you without solid proof. Instead of admitting to your mistakes, you're trying to force me to fix them for you. But even if I did explain things, do you think he'd believe you? He'd only look down on you more." With that, I slammed the door in his face and started packing my belongings. Soon, I would leave for college, and this whole ordeal would finally be behind me. I had no interest in wasting another second on Ethan and Lily. But Ethan seemed to have lost his mind. Enraged, he grabbed a rock and shattered my window. "You think you can just say no?" he bellowed. "Your father begged me to marry you. Get him out here now." I froze at the sound of breaking glass. Before I could react, I saw my father slowly walking out of the house, his steps unsteady. Panic surged through me, and I quickly grabbed his sleeve. "Dad, please, I really don't want to marry him," I pleaded. "I'm begging you." My father gently patted my hand before turning to Ethan. Ethan stood there with his arms crossed, his smirk full of arrogance. "Look at your family's situation," he scoffed. "Your daughter marrying me would be the best thing that ever happened to her. What's wrong with listening to me? Not only can she not help me in my career, but now she's trying to ruin me. Tell me, old man, what should we do about this?" My father straightened his back under the morning sun, his shadow long and steady. Clearing his throat, he spoke with quiet dignity. "If you think marrying my daughter is too good for her," he said, "then I won't marry her off. My daughter will do whatever she wants. I thought she liked you, which is why I wanted her to marry you. But now I know that what she truly wants is to study. Even if I have to sell everything we own, I will make sure she gets her education." Ethan's arrogant expression froze completely. He blinked, then rubbed his ear as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. "You must be out of your damn mind," he spat, his face flushing with rage. He rolled up his sleeves and lunged at my father. I instinctively threw myself in front of my dad, only to be punched straight to the ground. "Emma, you really want to do this?" Ethan snarled. "Fine, then I'll beat you both." Just as his fist was about to land again, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Take them away." Everyone's head snapped up. None of us had realized that someone had called the police. A group of officers marched forward, grabbing both Ethan and Lily. The officer in charge stepped forward, his gaze sharp. "The mayor called and informed us that there have been serious misconduct issues in this village. Lily White has been caught stealing and violating moral conduct, and Ethan Carter is guilty of the same. On top of that, they were found engaging in inappropriate behavior in the woods late at night. Both of them have been charged with public indecency and will be taken into custody." I stared in shock as Ethan and Lily were forcibly dragged away. Only then did I remember that in this era, public indecency was a serious crime. If the mayor personally named them as offenders, their punishment would be severe. Ethan and Lily were officially arrested and locked away. Meanwhile, I took my acceptance letter and went to college, finally free of them. My future was now wide open. After graduation, I chose to work in chemical research at the same military base where Ethan had once served. That was the last time I ever heard about him. Years later, I found out that Ethan had gotten into fights in prison and lost an eye. He had also broken his leg, which left him permanently disabled. After that, he finally learned to behave. As for Lily, her family helped her escape from prison once, but while trying to cross a river, the current was too strong. She drowned in the freezing waters, bringing her miserable life to an abrupt end. Their stories ended there. But my life had only just begun. To be reborn and live again, I was truly lucky. That's why I had to cherish every moment, not just for myself, but for the bright and prosperous future ahead. I was grateful to be alive under my country's red flag, stepping forward into a new life with no regrets.